from Irvine. When Irvine passed the CEDAW resolution, that was just like 2 weeks ago, something like that. And at that meeting, I learned that in the history of the California State Assembly, there had been 4,400 some men, and that the Assemblywoman, Ms. Norris, who was with us, was the 162nd woman. So we have a long way to go. As Krishanti say, a lot of the work that needs to be done beyond passing of the ordinance is still on our radar screen. Some of you know that I was involved with organizing the NGO Forum in 1995. And I do remember that really important motto that we had during that conference, which was, look at the world through women's eyes, and that all issues are women's issues. So we have since grown and expanded to take on, particularly, I think the big change for me is the number of issues that we have taken on as women's issues, increasingly into the governance space from the protest space. And that is a very, very huge leap, I think, for the women's movement in 25 years. Here's another big leap. We are part of nearly 25,000 people here at the NGO Forum. This is a record for us. We have never had more than that. And if you combine our events with the UN events during this CSW 65, we are 850 events moving strong. So as we told Secretary Guterres the other day, the feminist and women's movement is actually stronger than ever. If we face backlash in local communities and other places, it's because we are also winning. So how can we take this to even another place? I had mentioned a couple of these opportunities during a meeting we had with the San Francisco group, but I would like to repeat them here. First, we have the UN agenda, which is the Sustainable Development Goals. And goal number 11 is the one on cities. So if we take the Beijing Platform for Action, which is the policy guide, with CEDAW, which is the legally binding framework, along with other human rights treaties, and the Sustainable Development Goals offers specific targets, and again, agreed upon by many member states. So that's why it is it's an opportunity for us to take our cities there and to take those 3 pillars as roadmaps to where we could move with the Cities for CEDAW campaign. Of course, SDG 3 is really on top of the list. That's the one on health. And if we combine that with our SDG 5, very specifically on women, on gender and women's empowerment, then I think we have actually got a kind of checklist of where we need to go with our activities on CEDAW, particularly the nearly 6 SDGs which deal with the environment and climate crisis. So the second place is this thing called the Generation Equality Forum, and I'm going to go through that even though some of you may know about it. This is an interesting innovation from my point of view, where Mexico and France are co-sponsoring this Generation Equality Forum officially and convened by UN women, but outside of the UN space. Why are they doing that? Because it seems so clear that the UN space is becoming more and more difficult to take very quick and accelerated action, and yet we need to be connected to it. So we'll have these 6 action coalitions, which actually crystallize the 12 critical areas of concern of the Beijing Platform for Action into 6 different pieces. I'll mention them. They are gender-based violence, economic justice, bodily autonomy and sexual reproductive health and rights, climate justice, technology and innovation, and feminist movements. So if we take their concept, it is to create new partnerships outside, which includes governments, private sector philanthropies, international bodies like the UN, and civil society. And if we were to do this in the cities, we would probably do it much faster and better, bottom up, than actually can be done at the level of member states. And the reason I say that is because we already see that innovation happens in cities. That's not just technology innovation, but social innovation as well. And not only that, we can measure how we are progressing, sometimes much faster and with the intersecting discrimination data that we need in order to see whether or not what we're doing is correct. So I invite us to work on the SDGs in cities using the CEDAW framework as our roadmap, and to also get involved with these action coalitions, maybe even create action coalitions based on the Cities for CEDAW model, working with city government inside and outside. And I think will contribute a great deal to the acceleration of implementation on the Beijing Platform for Action. So one of my favorite images is if we all jumped on the same spot. Sorry, I've been talking for a couple hours. If we all jumped on the same spot of the Earth, we would knock the Earth out of orbit.
Well, thank you. So that's quite a number of challenges, but it all is to the greater enhancement of women and girls around the globe. We're getting started on that. And just before I introduce the 5 speakers from the different cities, I want to turn back to Krishanti, who has another word to offer.
Thank you so much for this time. I just wanted to let you know, I brought up the issue of public safety in cities. One of the things that we are working on is really getting women to develop set of indicators for public safety. This work started happening with cities and counties and communities across the globe. And we are having a session on the 23rd. So those who are interested in the local implementation of CEDAW and passing CEDAW might be interested in that particular the session. And right now, my colleague Corina is adding the information onto the chat. So it is about public safety, I think safety in public spaces in cities. And so I hope we will see all of you in that particular one, because it's directly related to the implementation of CEDAW. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's quite relevant, because that's an entry point for many cities going forward, if they haven't already. We selected 5 cities for their work, not only because of the way they've handled their challenges, which, as you know, are legion across the country, but also in the way that they've achieved. They have significant achievements to report, whether or not they have a full-fledged ordinance. So we chose a city from the East, some Midwest cities, and then cities from the West Coast, so that we would have a variety of offerings, bigger cities, smaller cities, that would give you a sense of challenges and achievements, and how they got to that place, what their journey has been. And I'd like to start off with Mayor Farah Khan, who deserves, before she says a word, a round of applause for shepherding through her city council. And she has been the mayor of Irvine, California since 2020. So it is not a very long time to have this achievement, but we salute you, and we'd love to hear how you did it and what recommendations you have for other cities. Mayor Khan.
Thank you so much, Gail. It's such an honor to be here with everyone. This is something, CEDAW was something that was brought up in our city back in 2016. And I remember sitting in the audience, that was well before I was elected into office, and watching the conversation go from understanding what CEDAW would bring to our city to 2 councilwomen arguing over who would get credit for it, and ended up failing the initiative. So that was very, very disappointing. And I know when I got elected onto the Irvine City Council in 2018, it was one of my goals that I did want to bring forward. And so kind of rehash the communications with Elahi and making sure that we knew exactly what we were getting into. But, this work started a year ago when I started meeting with Elahi and some other of our women in the city to really talk about how we were going to bring this forward. one of the things I did not want was to see an initiative like this fail in any way, because it was very important, not only to me, but I think to just about everyone in our city, because like people say, women's issues are human rights issues. Safety for women means safety for everyone. And so it took a lot of work behind the scenes before we even brought it forward. And that included us getting together with a lot of our organizations, not only in the city, but in Orange County, reaching out to leaders that were running the domestic violence shelters, reaching out to folks that were running homeless shelters, reaching out to people that were, a part of the University of Irvine, University of California, Irvine's domestic violence clinic, talking to the attorneys there, because they are dealing with this issue on a day in, day out basis. And so for us, it was really trying to gather as much data as we could about what's happening in our city and in our county, and bringing that back to our colleagues on the council. And so I have to say that, I thank Elahi so much, because without her effort throughout the years, without her persistency, we wouldn't be here today. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to develop a resolution on CEDAW, but we wanted it to be an effective one, not just, to put it out there. Because sometimes what happens in cities is you'll get a resolution put out and everyone kind of gets excited about it and it gets put away and nothing happens. That's not what I wanted to see. I wanted to see some actionable items that would be listed in our resolution. And so the month prior, we had set up the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee to really look at what our city policies look like, what we were doing when it came to making sure that there was a level playing field for all when it came to not only working within the city, but contracting with the city and the overall quality of life in our city. And so with that, we were able to add things like, economic development for women and girls. We were able to add further protections for women that face domestic violence, especially for those that worked in the city, to make sure that they were given the resources that they needed. They were given the time, a paid time, to make sure that they could take care of themselves and any of their family members, and really work towards not only preventing, but looking out for those that experience sexual violence or domestic violence in any sorts. And then the final thing is really working with our schools and making sure our young girls knew that we were working hard for their protection as well. And so it was really exciting. March 9th is the day that we presented it to council. And I'm just so excited that, it passed unanimously. It passed between party lines, between men and women. And, I couldn't be more happier, but I have to give a lot of that credit to not only Elahi, Amani, but also to all the women and the organizations that worked behind the scenes to get us to this point.
Thank you very much. That's very inspiring. And it is a comprehensive effort, isn't it, really? And thank you for mentioning Elahi Amani. I want just wave quickly. I'd like to call your attention to introduce you to Elahi as the president of the board of WIN currently, and is helping us organize all of California for CEDAW. So thank you. I would like now to introduce Susan Noonan from Cincinnati. And Cincinnati has a very mature gender equity task force and has shepherded through a very robust CEDAW initiative. So Susan, we'd like to hear more about that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Again, it is a very huge honor for me to be here. I was in New York City a few years ago and met some of you, and that was right in the beginning of the project. So I'm very excited, and I'm excited to see that Dr. Jan Marie Fritz is on this call, because it never would have happened in Cincinnati if it were not for Dr. Jan Marie Fritz. So a little bit of the history. In 2013, Dr. Fritz encouraged her graduate class at the University of Cincinnati to take CEDAW on as their project. They did. They researched CEDAW. They lobbied our city council. They found an advocate. And after working hard with a coalition of people for 2 years, in 2015, Cincinnati actually passed a resolution Now, we know our resolution did not have a lot of teeth. That's the way our city government works. So we knew that we wanted to continue on to get that ordinance passed. So after Dr. Fritz's class graduated, she then approached me because I was president of a local Women City Club group. I had never heard of CEDAW in 2015. I didn't know what it meant. And so needless to say, I got very involved and have remained involved, and I'm just so excited to be a part of this group. So what we did is build a coalition of public and private nonprofits. Dr. Fritz had already started to do that. And we continued working for the next 2 years with this group that included people from the University of Cincinnati, because we knew that they were the ones we wanted to do our gender analysis. Our group also included people from the city of Cincinnati who could help us get resources. And so we actually completely drafted an ordinance, wrote all of the wording before we approached the vice mayor, who happened to be a friend, and he said that he would put this before council. So writing the ordinance really makes a difference. It saves them time and effort. So in May of 2017, 4 years after Dr. Fritz started this project, both of our ordinances passed. The city had changed our one drafted ordinance into two, one of which designated that the mayor would appoint a task force of 14 women to oversee and monitor. And the second designated that the city would give $8,000 toward a gender analysis. It's not a lot, but at least it was a little bit of skin in the game. So we were happy about that. But before we went to the mayor, the vice mayor, we had already started soliciting funds from our nonprofits, who didn't give a lot, but they all gave something. And from the university research team was able to raise $10,000 from all different entities and departments at the university. And our total was $21,000, which is not a lot for a 2-year study. So needless to say, University of Cincinnati put in a lot of their own time and effort, and we're very grateful for that. So the task force research team in order to develop the gender analysis, and that's another really important point. If you can have your, I think you need to okay. If you could have whomever is going to do your gender analysis work with your steering committee, it's really important. We did a preliminary report to our city's Equity, Inclusion, Education, and Arts Committee in 2018 with the first phase of our report. Our first phase was quantitative, and it basically examined the composition and pay differentials in all city departments, boards, and commissions. So this gender analysis in our city was of all city departments, boards, and commissions. We also did a second phase, which looked in depth at 5 departments, which were determined by their CEDAW themes and by their gender composition: police, fire, health, and 2 smaller departments. So the second phase finished in early 2020. That was 6 years from the beginning. And the task force then took the report, which was over 90 pages from the University of Cincinnati, an incredibly comprehensive report. And we curated that down into, what you see behind me, we made a glossy pamphlet of 10 top line findings and recommendations, knowing that City Council was not going to read 91 pages when we presented it. So the day that we presented to City Council was right after the pandemic started. It was April of 2020, and Breonna Taylor had been shot, George Floyd had been shot, we had racial injustice, we had the pandemic, and our city manager resigned that day. So needless to say, our council people were not totally engaged with us. However, they were engaged enough to say, this is the most professional and thorough report we've ever seen from an all-volunteer task force. So please come back to us when the pandemic is over. Well, of course, the pandemic was not over in the fall. And in the last few months, we have had 3 city council people arrested by the FBI and charged with corruption. And so we have 3 that are term limited. So we have 2 council people left, neither of whom were involved with CEDAW initially. So we've had quite a few challenges to face, needless to say. But where we are today, the co-chair and I just met and decided it's time to go to 2 of the newly appointed council members who are female and who are friends. And we are going to educate them on CEDAW, and we are going to give them what we see as our top 3 doable, affordable, and important top line recommendations that we made. So just quickly, some of the most effective strategies that we used in passing the ordinance, the resolution, the ordinance, and the finishing the gender analysis is that we included the university people that we knew were going to do the study from the very beginning of the process. We developed a community coalition that included public and private people, as well as somebody from not only the city, not only a politician, but you need to get somebody from city administration. They really helped us get all the information and resources that we need. If you're doing it in a county, make sure you get somebody from the county administration and a commissioner's aide. We chose the simple name, Cincinnati for CEDAW Coalition, so people could recognize it. You do need that political will, and that's why we get the vice mayor behind it. Once you get an advisory committee or a task force, however you do it, have a little retreat so people get to know each other and set some long-term and short-term goals. When you're providing the city, when you're going after the ordinance or the resolution, make sure you give them a completely written draft. Have somebody that knows how to do that. We were lucky and we did, and that saves them time and effort, and maybe they'll leave everything in that you put in. We put CEDAW in, and our vice mayor first resisted that, but we were able to tell him how important it was to have that in. So, you know, our theme is definitely the CEDAW theme. And lastly, a website like Pittsburgh has is awesome. We don't have one of those, but we do have a spot on our city's website. And the last thing is that when we presented, what we always did, and we presented 2 or 3 times, we always made sure we talked about the city's successes before we made the recommendations. And they have, at this point, they have actually implemented 8 of the kinds of recommendations that we made. And let me just give you an example of one that's so simple. Our fire women had always had to wear men's uniforms, which were very uncomfortable. So now the fire department provides women's uniforms for the women. And that's one of the very simple things that happened. So I think I've gone over my time, but some of the things that the city did, the ordinance to prohibit salary history, the clerk of council has to make public the demographics of every commission and board before they appoint new people, which was a great thing because we had so few women on commissions and boards. We established an affordable housing trust fund, and an eviction fund to help women from getting evicted. So, and we've also done a lot with domestic violence, a program where a domestic violence person goes with the police on calls. And we are having training implemented throughout the whole police department from our Women Helping Women group. So I'll stop talking now. And I put my name in the chat. Anybody who would like a copy of anything that I've talked about, you know, our top line findings, our report, or our resolutions or our ordinances, email me and I'll be glad to send that to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We thank you for your accomplishments, and we know it's just the beginning. Have a lot more to do. It's very impressive. We're going alphabetically, so Cincinnati, then Kansas City, then Pittsburgh, then San Jose. So Kansas City, Alice Kitchen. Alice and I worked together on the Women's Equality Coalition, and we started a Midwest CEDAW coalition some years ago. We've had stops and starts. It's been a long time, but we do have, and Alice will tell you, because she is our champion and torchbearer for what we have accomplished in Kansas City.
Thank you. First, I'll give some background and sort of a summary of our process so far and lessons learned. So by way of background, we're a 2-state metropolitan area with 8 counties. And so Kansas City is the biggest city, and that's where we did focus our attention. Now, the background of all of this is that we're in a very red state, 2 red states. Josh Hawley beat Claire McCaskill. And so that should give you some perspective. And the word UN in our state capital is a dirty word. So anytime we mention the coast and their what they're doing, it doesn't get a lot of, it doesn't resonate with our elected officials in general. We may have the distinction for the longest journey to a full status. Okay, so now with that disclaimer, the process started in 2014. Gail has had a long background with CEDAW and the United Nations, and she came with that to our coalition. And I had a background with the Commission on the Status of Women, an 8-county metropolitan commission, and it went defunct because of lack of funding and lack of governmental support. So in 2014, we introduced a resolution, and it went through unanimously, and we weren't even there to explain it. That was sort of a shock. And a resolution in this case is an aspirational statement. Well, of course, the city council turned over that year, and or half of them, and so we then had to climb uphill to get acquainted with all of our city council members and befriend them, which is a cycle that continues on and on. So as we built those relationships, we were able to spend time with the Mayor Pro Tem. The mayor was not supportive and not a part of our early effort. This mayor, then mayor. So this particular city councilman, who is the Mayor Pro Tem, was able to get us $75,000 of funding to do a gender study. That gender study has been completed and will be reported to the city council at the end of the month. We know there will be adjustment because they took every job code in the whole city, except for the unions, and they're paid the same, and looked at each job code and the men and women in those codes based on equity, experience and education and skills and value. So that report, I'm sure, will cost money. Then in the meantime, our coalition and members of AAUW did a report, and we went to all of the standards, benchmarks in CEDAW, and we measured them. So leadership, who's in leadership positions, the pay equity, which we'll find out, and family-friendly policies and practices and safety and protection. So we had statements and research that we found and reported on, and we measured them, and we gave them a rating of parity or no parity, and this is what needs to happen. And so that report has been submitted to the council and the mayor, but we have not had a chance to present it formally. And so in that report, the first thing we asked for was an ordinance. We didn't get an ordinance in the very beginning. The atmosphere was not such that we would. So now we have a report to prove why we need this. And I think that will undergird not only the why, the compelling reason, but also why we need a women's commission, which we recommended as well. And we said who should be members of that, because we didn't want the elected officials to be picking their friends. So we said it was all the commission members who would have a seat at the table. Along the way, we had the city pass an ordinance eliminating the salary history in the hiring process. And we learned that from Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and California and New York. And we're grateful that we did for the whole city of Kansas City. And we also passed an ordinance that would prevent all landlords from evicting a woman who had experienced sexual assault or domestic violence. So our next step is to take that report and give it to the city. And one other thing is that in the safety and protection, we asked them to pass an ordinance that would put in the codes the crime prevention for environmental design, which isn't in the CEDAW nuts and bolts, but it's something that's come about in recent times. And we think that that will help not only the commercial area, but the residential areas for safety and protection for women. So the lessons learned, I think you probably picking them up from my colleagues, is that know your city structure, know the timetables and when they turn over, and befriend those, all of them, and even the ones you think are opposing. Spend time with them. You know, they're more convincing to their colleagues than your friends who really like you and have been on board all along. Their support means a whole lot. We in our report found out what the cost of harassment and discrimination was to the city. One law firm had, I think, 14 cases in 6 years, and the cost to the city was $8 million. And then the whole city, for the same period of time, it was $57 million for lawsuits beyond just discrimination and harassment. But it's very expensive, and that really got the city's attention. And I would say, look at what new standards for eliminating discrimination. Over time, we've understood better how to eliminate discrimination in new ways. And they may not be in our early benchmarks, but when they come along, listen to them and learn from them. And I agree totally with my colleagues who have said, applaud what's good. We right away about a year ago went and gave recognition and applause to our city, because half of our city council are made up of women, and women, some women of color, and 18 department heads. Out of that, 11 are women. Our fire department head, our finance, our human resources, they're all women. And so if you keep pointing on what's working well, they feel like you're your friends, and that matters a lot. And so I think that, and Sue Young said something to the effect about how important cities are. Cities are the engines of social change. And if you can be part of that engine, your influence will be forever imbued. And it needs to be in the infrastructure, it needs to be in the regulations, because we turn over, they turn over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very inspiring. Even though I was there at the whole thing, I was still inspired when I hear the story. I'm going to pass it on now to Lee Fogarty, who we've met at many CSWs. And when June and Joanne convened us to meet on Cities for CEDAW. So we are eager to hear what's going on in Pittsburgh. I want you to note that we have just Kansas City has just looked into what Pittsburgh has been doing, and it helped us in our recent effort. So we salute you, and we'd love to hear how you achieved all that. Lee Fogarty.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I actually got involved about 2014 in looking at Cities for CEDAW at a CSW event. And then within the next year, I had found people in the city who were already working on this. So we have sort of a two-pronged approach, and some of what you've been saying has answered a question that I had in how closely do your CEDAW groups get to continue when there's an ordinance? So, and I'll tell you more about that later. But so we were the 6th CEDAW city, and I always say we were the first non-coastal city because I think that makes a difference.
It is.
We were the first to highlight intersectionality in our ordinance also, and we've been focused on that. It took us about a year and a half from beginning to when we had the ordinance ratified. And we did it by working, going out and working with people. I think we had endorsements from over 30 groups in the city. We worked with the Women's Coalition on city council. We were actually very lucky in this because when we were having our public hearing, it was a few days after the 2016 election. So we were swamped with people who wanted to make comments. And we had over 100 people, and the clerk in charge of that, who was a woman, said, "Don't worry, every one of your people will get to make a comment." So it was passed unanimously, but the interesting thing is none of the male council members came to the hearing.
Oh.
And that kind of support sort of, or lack of support, has stayed the same as we were doing this. In our ordinance, and we realize that it's not as good as it should be, so we've been revising it a bit, but we also have some suggestions for you going on to do the right one. We named the areas that we wanted to have represented, but the mayor would not let us take part in that process. So we had some very, very good people in there, but we missed some of the areas we wanted. We did include in it some people from the city, particularly in finance and HR, and one of the city council members. The two of the people from the city were men, and when they first came in, I think they weren't sure what we were going to do to them, but they have become our strongest allies in this process now. They are the first people to speak up and to go and look at ways that we can work around some of the hitches in working with a government organization. So very importantly, the ordinance also says that a member of our CEDAW commission, our CEDAW group, must be on the commission at all times. I wish we had been a little broader about that and could have extended it to bring more people in, because it gave us less of a voice on it, and particularly with women, with people there who were not aware of the history or the vision of CEDAW. So that has, they've been very wonderful in many ways, but it sometimes is an uphill battle to remind people of what we're looking for. For example, one of the women who was dealing with the Gender Analysis Committee, we were getting a lot of problems with funding on it, and she said, we should just drop this and have another project. And I was the only one who said, we can't drop this. This is what we have to do. This is part of what we have to do here. And so it's very important that we have our voice there. We did finish the first phase of our gender analysis in 2019. It came up with some very valuable information about racism and racial inequality in Pittsburgh, but it wasn't exactly what we had wanted it to be. And a group of very strong women from the African-American community who had been working on these issues for years wrote a very strong letter to us saying, wait a minute, this isn't fitting with what we want, and you haven't asked us what we need and what we've already been doing. So two of the members of our commission, a man and a woman who are both African-American with strong ties to the community, set up meetings where we met with that group of women and anyone else who was interested and worked these issues out. And I'll tell you, that was, it was really amazing, because it's the first time in the city of Pittsburgh I have seen people crossing that racial border to work very actively with each other and working with people who were affected most by the issues that came up and had been doing the work on it already. So already had very strong ideas and recommendations that we could work on. And then the pandemic came. So we sort of got a little bit stuck from that. Interestingly, no, it's a very good report for what it is. It's not a very good report for us, but it's a very good report. And it has dramatically refocused grant making and nonprofit priorities throughout the city. And many other council members have used it to work on issues of getting more parity for African Americans in the city. We also launched a workforce equity initiative working with AAUW, which has been very helpful in developing a program to help women prepare for work. Yeah, they had done one in Boston already, and this one again it was in person, so we got cut back during the pandemic, but it's now out there doing it virtually at this point. The commission has also advised the city about best practices for inclusive facilities, such as all gender bathrooms and changing station and lactation rooms. And we've done that very actively now. In the first, right after the commission was set up, we were very surprised to hear, it was a good thing, but it was surprising the way it was done, that the mayor was doing some very positive things to support women and women's issues in the city, but he hadn't done it with us. So we had to work through, how do we get included in all of the things that are going on? So we are working now on how we can have a second part of the report, which will be a community participatory process where we can pull people together from the commission, from the communities, and work on this. The problem is that one of the things we've been having trouble with is our funds were cut. So the money we were supposed to have to pay for this has been taken away at this point, and we have to see what else we can do. So listening to the other people is helpful to bring some things back and talk about, maybe we can approach it this way. Maybe this would be a helpful thing to do. Our Pittsburgh for CEDAW group has now started an Allegheny County for CEDAW group. And are working with them in the same way we got Pittsburgh for CEDAW to be successful. We're working with getting endorsements from organizations in the city. We've met with 4 of the 15 commissioners. I think they're all women commissioners there, and we've begun the process there. And we're now, as we're opening up a little bit, getting more and more active about that. Certainly the challenges that we've had during the pandemic have been what a lot of you have, I'm sure. Everybody's tired, everybody's having trouble in Zoom, and we don't know quite how to do all of this. But other ones that were labeled from our executive director where continued societal unfamiliarity with intersectional feminist practice and with CEDAW. And so we have to be more open about that. Lack of female leadership and representatives at the highest decision-making levels in the city, and limited funding and irregular funding to pay for things that we need to do, like the gender analysis, and for staffing. So we have some suggestions on things that we think could be more helpful. We learned it by making some mistakes, but we're working on revising them now. And we actually have a very strong commission at this point. I actually just rolled off as a commissioner because I'd been on it for 3 years, and our Pittsburgh for CEDAW group had agreed that we were going to share this process along the way. So it was time for the next person to move on, and we'll support her, and she'll come back to us. So what you need to do early on is identify and invite representatives from diverse community organizations and ask them to be part of our steering committee. That proved to be a very, very helpful way to develop coalitions and have a lot of input from the organizations across the board, so that they were very helpful to us as we went through. Connect through your constituents with council members and people in the executive administration. Okay, write a good ordinance and get someone to review it to see what you left out. Make sure financing is included. Without financing, it's only a good idea. And then you want to really include the things that other people have been talking there about, a specific and timeline implementation of gender analysis. Mm-hmm. And so I'll just, if there are questions, I can go there, but thank you for this. And thank you for hearing it from everybody else. It's so helpful.
It is. And of course, we have used the Cincinnati and Pittsburgh models, and we thank you for all you've done. Thank you for going through all those steps. I want to introduce now Tarane Rusta from San Jose, and I'm not familiar with San Jose's model, so I would be very interested to hear. Tarane is leading the Silicon Valley CEDAW task force, which is very impressive. And I'd love to hear what what your experience has been. Please note that every city is different, has its own path, its own way of proceeding, and its own accomplishments. So over to you, San Jose and Silicon Valley.
Thank you, Gail. I want to thank Ella and Gail and everyone else who's been organizing this panel so we can share our experiences and help from each other. Learn from each other. So my own journey with CEDAW started about 14 years ago. It was 2007 or something, where I joined the efforts led by the Santa Clara County Commission on Status of Women and Office of Women's Policy. And unfortunately, those efforts didn't go anywhere, and there was a complete halt on it. And at least I didn't hear about it for years and years. And fast forward to summer of 2016. This is a year after I had established a nonprofit women's organization. And I decided to reach out to some women and organizations that I had worked with in the past to start a grassroots movement pursuing CEDAW. And these efforts led to building a coalition of more than 16 organizations in the community. And these organizations consisted of women's organizations, human rights organizations, and civil rights organizations. And that was the birth of our Silicon Valley CEDAW task force. Sorry, my phone is ringing. We decided to come up with some strategies from the beginning, and one of our strategies was to go straight for the ordinance. And the number two was to identify someone within the local government in the city of San Jose to be our champion, to lead the effort. And number three was to have that person, whoever we identify, to make a verbal commitment to us in the meeting. And number four, we wanted to have that person to make that commitment or announce that commitment publicly in the public forum. And that was very important to us to make that happen. And we had to do a lot of connections and meetings and deciding how to go about that, but because that was something kind of out of our control, but fortunately we made it happen. So some of our challenges are these common challenges of lack of information and knowledge about CEDAW to begin with. Even the name CEDAW is not very user-friendly. And lack of funding, which I always call lack of priority, because there's always funding. It's just that women have never been a priority. And with that, our strategy was to overcome these barriers by providing as much information and education about CEDAW. In fact, we started calling it Women's Bill of Rights interchangeably with CEDAW. So that resonated more with the city council members and everyone else. We also decided to get the community involved. So we mobilized our community to make phone calls and send emails and text messages to council members and demand them to pass the CEDAW ordinance. We also had the community to show up to our the meetings, the city council meetings, and speak about the importance of CEDAW and why is it important. So all of these, of course, led to, fast forward to December 19, 2017, where the CEDAW ordinance was passed unanimously by all the council members and the mayor, even though there are a couple of council members that were quite concerned about because they were not in support of, but somehow they voted yes on it. And of course, our next step would have been to secure funding for the gender analysis. And again, we hit another roadblock because we were told that there's no funding for you. We don't have money. And in fact, the San Jose City, the mayor of San Jose tasked the San Jose City manager to come up with a proposal how to do the gender analysis internally by one of the internal departments. And the department they had in mind was the Human Services Commission. And we opposed that. We felt that this was completely out of the scope of their practice. They're not trained, they're not equipped to do that kind of study. So we pushed back and they pushed back and we went back and forth. And finally, our strategy was to go to the media. And we did. So myself and another task force member, Ruth Silvertop, another amazing leader and women's rights activist and human rights activist, we wrote an op-ed in one of the local papers. And interestingly enough, the next day after this article, the op-ed was published, I got a call from San Jose City Manager's office asking to meet with us, which in the past they had kind of didn't reject directly, but they rejected. So we had a meeting and we came out of the meeting with the San Jose City committing $50,000 to our gender analysis. And of course, the city had to go through their own process of the RFIs and RFPs, and then COVID happened. So all of that delayed the whole process of starting the gender analysis. And the latest news is where we are at is that finally the city of San Jose selected a consultant, a vendor to do the study. And the consultant is Social Justice Innovation Center, part of the Florida State University. And they're going to start with one department, and they're going to study for next 6 months. And they're going to look at the programmatic and the staffing and budgetary elements of the department. Now, we had specifically requested the city of San Jose to consider if they have to pick one department to be audited first, we wanted it to be the police department.
Oh, wow.
And they screamed and they're not happy about, I mean, the police department were not happy about it when they heard it. But anyway, I'm glad to report to you that the city of San Jose agreed to that. And so the consultants are going to be studying and auditing the police department. And the plan is for the city of San Jose, they want to use the same blueprint or roadmap that is going to be used for the police department and applied to other departments, again, internally, again, lack of funding. And as a task force, we are opposing that. And but we're going to let the study begin, and we're going to continue to monitor the situation. We're going to intervene, cause trouble, whatever it takes to make sure that we're going to have a comprehensive gender analysis study. And our vision and our goal is that, you know, all the studies done, that the CEDAW becomes the law of the land, and that would be implemented, and that it would have tangible, real impact on the lives of women and girls in our community. Thank you so much for the opportunity again.
Thank you so much, Taraneh, and thanks to San Jose for your persistence, because as you know, in his remarks to women, W said, we have to push back against the pushback. We have to continue to do that because there will be pushback, and if we don't push back, it won't work. But he also said you have to have a plan, and we do have a plan. We have our Cities for CEDAW models, which are quite diverse, but they are also very consistent in the gender study and analysis and involvement of the community. So we have a long way to go, but we're on this path. And I thank our 5 speakers, the Mayor of Irvine, Mayor Khan, thank you so much. And Susan Noonan from Cincinnati, Lee Fogarty, Pittsburgh, Alice Kitchen, Kansas City, and Taraneh Rusta from San Jose. Thank you very, very much. I also want to thank the co-sponsorship of Soon Young and her organization, Feminist and Women's Movement Action Plan, who will have other sessions at the CSW. Take note of those. A few words, we do have some time for question and answer and for more discussion. I would like to just remind you though that we have a chat area where you could put your contact information. We really do want to hear from you. We have a research initiative going on right now. We have a draft, an early draft. We don't have as much participation as we would like. We would like all 60 plus cities, counties, et cetera, to communicate with us. We have about half of that to date. So some people change and initiatives stall, but we'd certainly love to hear from you if you could send us your email. And then also we will also, in addition to that, we will keep you notified of when that report comes out, which is quite imminent. Thank you so much for your comments to our speakers. We appreciate it so much. We're going to take some questions now. Alahe and June Marie from WIN, do you see questions in the chat that you can recommend that we start with? There's quite a lot of interest. Sorry, June Marie.
तुमने संजय को क्यों नहीं जवाब दिया? You only replied to.
Alahe, would you comment on the website? I see that it's down. I noticed quite a few questions about that.
Yes, they are. Actually, I'm in texting the web designer. We have some technical difficulty. That's why I'm texting, and it's going to be up soon. There was some glitch to the website, but it will be up maybe later today. Thank you.
Good.
So we have questions regarding resources, so folks will know that this website issue should be resolved hopefully quite soon. So go back to Cities for CEDAW. There are a lot of resources there. Let's see, questions about commissions. Do all of these cities have women's commissions? Is that necessary? What do we think about women's commissions? Don't know where you want to direct the questions, Gail, if everyone wants to kind of chime in.
Yeah. Thank you. We thought that individual speakers could field one at a time. We don't have to hear from necessarily everyone. Susan, I think you have your finger up.
Yeah, we do not have a permanent commission. We have the task force, which was established for 2 years, and we're still in operation 6 years later, 7 years later. But that is our #1 request that we're going to take to these new council members, is that there be some kind of a permanent commission or office for women and girls.
Krishanti, can you add a word to that? I know you have wide experience with setting up.
Yes, I think when we passed it in San Francisco, we really took the model from international CEDAW processes, right? So at the international level, when a government ratifies it, there has to be a body that implements it. So we used the Commission on the Status of Women in San Francisco to implement it. And it really helped build the commission by going from a commission to a department, right? So wherever it is, figure out what body within the city can actually implement the CEDAW legislation. It also could be a human rights commission. So San Francisco has a human rights commission as well as a women's commission. It doesn't mean that you need to have a women's commission. You need to have somebody who is willing to implement it from a feminist human rights standpoint. I think that is what is critical.
Can I add to that, Gail?
Thank you. Sun Young, do you have your-
Sorry, it's me again. Yes, I was in Vienna, which probably, if you really want a model of how to bring women's human rights into the entire city, do take a look at their structure, because they put their structure directly under the mayor's office. And having that kind of structure actually turns out nationally to be the key. Like in Thailand, the National Women's Council and Commission is under the Prime Minister's office. So there is something to be said for looking at the structure of your city and institutionalizing, even though you have a movement, even though you have groups who are working on the issue, because you need to work inside the government. And those structures, once in place, tend to be more enduring. And take the example also of Los Angeles. I don't know if anyone is here from Los Angeles, but I always look to them for what the mayor did, which is to call all the city departments to his home, I believe, when they passed CEDAW as an ordinance, and demand accountability in all his departments on budgeting. So there's a lot to do with the structure of the city, I think.
Yes, we probably should have on the website a little bit more about funding and funding models and other ways to do commissions. And June Marie, any other questions that jump out at you?
Yes, so we have a couple questions. One is on requests for these gender analyses, like are there lists of those that have been done? And then also, are there consultants to kind of help with this process of
On consultants, I would like to volunteer you, June Marie, and then you, Gail, and then also Eileen, and Krishanti's the backup.
Definitely, definitely. Lee, have you used consultants, and do you have some input on that question?
Do
Haven't, but we should have.
Yeah.
It would have been much more helpful. What has been helpful, though, is this body of people who have been working on Cities for CEDAW, because as we were developing it, I called people all the time and asked for questions and what would help and information. And then every time we met, I think we all learned a lot from each other about what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage it. I think it's a very important thing to do.
Krishanti, another comment?
So the first gender analysis that was developed for San Francisco was developed by consultants, and it is still on the website, right? So you can pull from it. And most of you have called me when you have gotten stuck or you have wanted steps, and I'm still happy to do that. I think what is important is that the traditional way in which gender analysis was developed has to shift now. Mm-hmm. And for example, integration of environmental issues are important. Back in the day, we didn't, right? And of course, intersectionality that Pittsburgh has done a really great job on. So I'm happy to field issues whenever you need to, but start with really looking at the first one that got done, and that particular gender analysis that's there will give you ideas what to do and what not to do. I think one thing is to remember that this is a human rights framework and not to lose sight of that, which means that you will include undocumented people in your city, right? That a traditional civil rights framework will not, because legally that would exclude undocumented people. So it's really important to know that if it's a gender analysis, it has to be framed within a human rights framework. Thanks.
That's a really important point. Thank you.
It is.
We have
Alice,
a couple more questions. Do we have anybody that wants to chime in on this one before we?
we have just a few minutes for one or two more questions. So Alice, do you want to comment on anything? You're muted.
How are you all handling transgender and the wide spectrum of feminism?
I'm happy to respond.
Yeah.
So San Francisco, again, when we started, we assumed because it was San Francisco that transgender would automatically be included, right? But we realized that we were dropping the ball. So it is important now to really look at non-binary, right? And have a area like a category for non-binary, male, female, non-binary. And depends on the city. Sometimes you want to have non-binary as well as trans, right? It really depends. And what is most important is have folks from the trans community in that first conversation when you're developing the gender analysis, because you may not always agree, but I think it's important to make sure that the gender analysis is inclusive rather than exclusive.
Thank you.
Grant.
Lee Fogarty.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And we started out with the commission looking into binary issues so that everybody had an idea of what we were talking about. And so it's included, and I would just like to reinforce what Shanti said, is always have somebody in there who represents the community we're talking about. That's essential.
Yeah.
I would just say that one of our, oh, I'm sorry.
I think
I was just going to add that in order to, I was just going to add that in order to really clarify, it's important to have definitions. And I think for us in our resolution, we defined exactly what we meant by gender to be very inclusive of a broad spectrum.
And Susan?
I was going to say that our University of Cincinnati researchers, one of the lead researchers was from the Department of Women's Women's Studies, Gender and Sexuality. And so she made sure that when we said woman, it included everything. But what we did find out was that in one of our deep dives in the health department that, you know, they were mostly older women that worked there and they had no idea what it meant. And so the language in all of their policies and so forth, you know, did not include any of that. So that was one of the recommendations that we made to the city. They need to update all of their policies.
Yes.
And ours wasn't in our ordinance, but we put it in our mission and vision for the commission.
Any further comments? June Marie, any other questions? I see one on the ratification of CEDAW globally through the Senate. I know that Krishanti and Soon Young have followed that. Any comments? June Zeitlin might have a comment. Please, so let's start with June for a moment. Good to see you.
Thank you. Wait.
You're muted. There we go.
Now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Gail and Elahi and everybody who spoke. I've just been overwhelmed with how much work has been done. So maybe the pandemic, you know, wasn't all so bad. But seriously, it's really impressive. Just on the federal front, obviously the Biden administration supports the ratification of CEDAW, but getting a 2/3 majority in the Senate, I think, as anybody who's followed even domestic politics knows, that we have a majority of 50, we hope. And so I think that while they support it, and it actually came up in a meeting with the State Department preparing for CSW to remind them that this is unfinished business that they need to do. But you know, I think it's not on the front burner, but I think it is important to keep reminding them. And actually the comment on the ERA, I just got breaking news that the House voted to eliminate the time deadline for the ERA. So I think that's kind of the priority in this area. But of course, the Senate is a whole other problem on all of these, both domestic and global issues.
Can I jump in here, Gail, on that one a little bit? Because I was, at various times, the ERA and CEDAW discussion has come up, are they competing with each other and so on? And I think it's really, really important that we can multitask. We know how to multitask. They are both really, really important. And so if we can go with one, I think we go straight to that one. The CEDAW one, I want to report to you that California State has started a coalition on that for state to state. And I still think that the place of the Cities for CEDAW is so brilliant because you guys are actually implementing without that ratification. And that is really something that the CEDAW committee thinks is extraordinary. So I would say they are all part of the same process, and various people will take different parts of it. Let's not compete with one another.
Just one more thing, Gail, there's a comment in the chat about the White House Gender Council. It does already exist. There's an executive order, and I can put, well, I have to look up the link. I'll try to get it in the chat, but it's very detailed, and it's actually holding agencies, I think, a lot more accountable than in the prior council under Obama and Biden. I think they've learned a lot about how to make cabinet departments and other agencies more accountable. And one of the executive director, there are two executive directors. One is a full-time staff, Jennifer Klein, who some of you might know because she's been working in this space and worked for Hillary Clinton at the State Department and has a long history on gender issues, both domestically and internationally. And then the other executive director who's part-time is Julia Reynoso, who's also the chief of staff to the First Lady, Jill Biden.
Right.
So there's, really strong support from the top. And one of the key items in the executive order is to submit a report with recommendations to the president in, I can't remember, it's like 6 or 8 months, in less than a year. So, he's really pushing that we get started, and I'm sure they'll be doing a lot of outreach. That just takes a while in a new administration to actually bring the staff on board and give them the tools that they need to, to do their work, but I think it's moving along.
That's a lot of great information. We have 3 hands. We have Krishanti and June Marie, and then I'm going to ask Elahi to see us to closure. Krishanti, you start.
Sorry, I think I just did not remove my hand from the previous time.
Okay.
The only thing is that I agree with June. The priority for CEDAW is low at this given time. Nevertheless, I don't think that we should ignore it. And 67 votes matter, and we don't have it right now, and we have never had it. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. June Marie?
Yeah, so I was messaging a little bit with Krishanti about this, but then I saw someone else jumped in on the chat about the possibility of doing something at the state level, since we have so much momentum in California and a lot of resolve. And I'm wondering what that might look like. I mean, it's not obviously not an ordinance, so I don't know what it would look like, but I do know that there's a lot of interest. And then I'll throw out one of the other questions from the chat that didn't get touched on, which was, does this affect affordable housing? These CEDAW. And then lastly, the idea of a lot of cities leveraging universities to do the work on the gender analysis, like Los Angeles with Loyola Marymount, and Raleigh Durham with North UNC and the North Carolina Coalition. So those are the questions. Anybody want to take them?
I saw some heads nod at affordable housing. So yes, Elahi.
I was just going to share that Gail and I had some initial conversation about California and how to strategize for that. So as we move forward, we will keep everybody updated about where we are going, and definitely with the board of Win and Krishante and Sun Yang, you know, we all have a team of consultants that they can help us to strategize for that. The other thing is a website will be up in 20 minutes or maybe less. We resolved the glitch. They asked us to wait for 20 minutes. And the other thing is I was gonna share that for me, it's such an exciting and joy to see CEDAW is being the grassroots movement for CEDAW from bottom and from top, from the administration level at federal level or a state level, and from grassroots is reaching each other. I recall that in early 1980s, I was going to Billy Heller's, maybe I shared this with some of you, I was going to Billy Heller's, which was a champion of CEDAW, and in Santa Monica, in her home in Santa Monica, and we were working on newsletter of CEDAW and mailing it to different women organizations and college campuses. This is way back when, and so I want to share the name of Billy Heller because she was really a champion for CEDAW, and her dream was to make CEDAW happen in US. So rest in strength, Billy Heller. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just say a few closing comments. We really do want to thank Sun Young for a co-sponsorship of this session. It was very valuable in getting it organized. We thank everyone, and please remember that Women's Intercultural Network, WIN, winaction.org, has been committed to the Beijing Platform for Action and the CAWA model, which is the California Women's Agenda, and championing, shepherding Cities for CEDAW for a long time. We're trying now to, I wouldn't call it a relaunch, I would call it a reinvigorating of Cities for CEDAW, to take it forward into the future, to find new cities, to support those cities in their processes right now, and to offer you as many resources as possible, because that's really what it takes, is resources. And I do know that anytime I have called or reached out to Krishante, she's always there with support and information, as well as Sun Yang and June Zeitland, and all of you can be resources to each other. It is thrilling to be part of the Cities for CEDAW. It's something real. So as we started in the beginning about hope, we never hope against hope, but we know that we have to do things. And this is one thing that we're doing, which is taking us forward. And what I'd like to say is that next year at CSW, when we will be live in person, I don't doubt, we will have a lot more to say, and perhaps we'll have 100 cities to report. We really thank all of you very much. And please, before you sign out, would you make sure your email or other information is in the chat, so we can send you the research report or you can be part of that if you haven't yet contributed, and we can send it to you when ready. And Elahe, I'd like to just send it over to you just to have a few words of closing.
Thank you very much for participating in this event. We're going to download the chat, and we'll be in touch. Gail and I will be in touch with all of you. We're going to share the videos, and also you put your emails so we stay in touch, and together we will make change possible. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Big bravo to everyone. Thank you so much. Onward.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Elahe, can you hear me? You know, I never asked you about the poll. Do we have results of the polling?
I
forgot to ask.
I was busy bringing the website up.
Yes, I know. Well, we'll check on it and we'll do a further poll.
Is up, and I shared the address in the chat.
Good. Excellent. Thank you, everyone.
Building
Yeah.
the plane on the runway.
Yes, building the plane on the runway. That's right. Thank you, Susan, Lee,
Yeah, I want to say thank you
Renee,
so much.
and
Thank you,
Alice.
Gail
Thank
and
you.
Malahi. It's
Thank
been a great experience. So appreciated. And our local National Public Radio channel called me today, and I saw she got on this for a while. So, you know, maybe we'll finally get some positive publicity.
Excellent,
That
excellent.
is wonderful. Thank you. I want to
Wonderful.
also thank Roja and Negar, our
Yes.
two tech support for this
Thank
event.
you.
Thank you. They're part of the Iranian Circle of Women's Intercultural Network, and they were helping us with all the technicality and live streaming on Instagram and Facebook. So
Excellent. Thank you.
That's
And this
great.
recording will be available also to everyone. And June Marie, thanks for your,
Yes.
thank you, June Mary,
thank you,
for
everyone.
helping.
Can't thank you enough, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.